She grabbed a billionaire's hand to escape her nightmare, not knowing he'd been waiting years for this moment. Before we dive into this emotional journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our heartwarming love stories. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the Plaza Hotel ballroom as Sana Mitchell's champagne flute trembled in her grip. Her emerald silk dress, the one she'd splurged on because her boss insisted this charity auction would open doors, now felt like a beacon drawing unwanted attention. Antonio. Her ex-husband stood near the main entrance, scanning the crowd with that predatory intensity she knew too well. The restraining order had expired 3 months ago, and he'd been testing every boundary since. Flowers at her office, hanging up when she answered unknown calls, always careful, always calculated. Sana's breath caught. She needed to leave, but he blocked her only exit. Backing toward the auction tables, her heel caught on carpet. A strong hand steadied her elbow, careful there. The voice was deep, commanding, with an undertone that made her breath hitch. Sana turned to find a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Easily 6'2" with a chiseled jaw that could cut glass. Black hair touched by distinguished silver at the temples, and steel-gray eyes that were studying her with recognition? No, impossible. She'd never met Sterling Cole before, though even she recognized the face from Forbes covers. The self-made billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, known for his perfectionist nature and unshakable composure. I'm sorry, Sana glanced back frantically. Antonio was moving closer, that charming smile spreading across his face, the one that had fooled everyone, including her. Without thinking, driven by pure desperation, she grabbed Sterling's hand. Please, she whispered urgently. My ex-husband is here. Please just pretend you know me, just for a minute. Sterling's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features, then something deeper, something that looked almost like wonder. His hand turned, fingers interlacing with hers as though they'd done this 1,000 times before, as though he'd been waiting his entire life for her to reach for him. There you are, beautiful, he said smoothly, his voice carrying just enough to be overheard. The endearment rolled off his tongue so naturally it sent unexpected warmth flooding through her. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost. Relief crashed over Sana as Sterling stood to his full, impressive height, his body immediately creating a protective barrier between her and the room. He was solid, immovable, and there was something in the way he held her hand, gently but possessively, that made her feel safer than she had in years. Thank you, she breathed, looking up at him. Is he that one? Sterling asked quietly, gesturing his head slightly towards Antonio's direction, as if he already knew him. And Sana could have sworn she saw his jaw clench with something more than casual concern. Tall navy tuxedo, the one coming this way with that smile everyone falls for. Something unreadable flickered across Sterling's face. Was that anger? I've got you, he said, his voice low and fierce. You're safe now. And somehow, inexplicably, Sana believed him. Sana. Antonio's voice sliced through her moment of security. What a delightful surprise. She turned, Sterling's hand still firmly holding hers, his thumb now making small, soothing circles on her skin, an intimacy that felt both foreign and familiar. Antonio stood there wearing his public mask, the successful entrepreneur everyone adored. Antonio, she managed, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Sterling's presence beside her was like having a mountain at her back. Antonio's dark eyes assessed Sterling with barely concealed hostility, then dropped to their joined hands. And who's this? Sterling Cole. He extended his free hand with absolute confidence, and Sana noticed how he positioned himself slightly in front of her, protective, but not controlling, Sana's boyfriend. The word sent a little thrill through her chest, despite the circumstances. Antonio's handshake was aggressive, a dominance display. Sterling didn't even blink, his grip firm and unwavering, his expression almost amused? Boyfriend? Antonio repeated, his smile tightening dangerously. How convenient. We've only been divorced 11 months. Sometimes when you meet the right person, Sterling said easily, and Sana could have sworn she heard genuine emotion in his voice, timing becomes irrelevant. Isn't that right, darling? He squeezed her hand gently, grounding her, and when she looked up at him, something in his eyes made her breath catch. There was an intensity there that went beyond playing a role. Yes, she said, finding courage in his unwavering gaze. Sometimes you just know. Antonio's jaw clenched, a tell she remembered too well. He was furious. But with Sterling beside her, tall and utterly unshakable, Antonio couldn't deploy his usual tactics. Couldn't grab her arm, couldn't lean in too close, couldn't whisper threats disguised as concern. "Well," Antonio said after a tense beat, his mask slipping slightly. "How fortunate for you, Sana. We should catch up sometime. I've been trying to reach you." "That won't be necessary," Sterling interrupted smoothly, and there was steel in his pleasant tone now. "Sana's made it quite clear she's moved forward. Perhaps you should do the same." "I wasn't talking to you," Antonio snapped, the facade cracking further. "No," Sterling agreed, his voice dropping to something dangerously calm. "You were attempting to pressure my girlfriend at a charity function. That ends now." The two men faced each other, and Sana watched something pass between them, a silent battle of wills. Sterling was taller, broader, and there was something in his quiet confidence that made Antonio take an involuntary step back. "This isn't over, Sana," Antonio said, his voice low and menacing. "We have unfinished business." "The only unfinished thing here," Sterling said, each word precise and cutting, "is your inability to accept reality. I suggest you work on that." For a moment, Sana thought Antonio might cause a scene. But then he noticed several guests watching with interest, and Antonio always cared about appearances. "Enjoy your evening," he said with false courtesy, shooting Sana one last look that promised this wasn't over, before walking away. Sana's knees nearly buckled with relief. Sterling's arm came around her waist immediately, steady and sure, pulling her close against his side. "Come on," he said gently, his breath warm against her ear. "Let's get you some air." He guided her through the crowd, his hand never leaving her waist, until they reached a private balcony overlooking Central Park. The October air was sharp and cleansing against her flushed cheeks. "I'm so sorry," Sana said immediately, pulling away slightly to look up at him. "I shouldn't have grabbed you like that. I just panicked, and you were there, and I didn't know what else to do." "Hey!" Sterling turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to gently grip her shoulders. His touch was warm through the thin silk of her dress. "You don't need to apologize. Not to me, not ever. Are you all right?" "I just used a complete stranger as a human shield against my ex-husband," she said, laughing shakily. "I don't think all right covers it." "We're not complete strangers," Sterling said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. There was a softness in his gray eyes, a tenderness that seemed to go beyond simple kindness. "I'm Sterling, you're Sana, and according to recent developments, we're dating now." Despite everything, she felt her lips curve into an almost smile. "That's what you're focusing on? Our fake relationship status?" "If I'm going to be a convincing boyfriend," Sterling said, his own mouth quirking up at the corner, "I should probably know the basics. Coffee preferences seem like a good start." "Oat milk latte," Sana said automatically. "Extra shot. I survive on caffeine and architectural deadlines." "Architect?" Sterling said. And was it her imagination, or did his eyes light up? "I noticed you earlier, actually. You were studying the auction catalog like you were analyzing structural integrity rather than just admiring art." He quickly explained when he saw her wondering how he had known her profession. But how could he not know everything about the woman that had been in his eyes for so long? The only one he couldn't get out of his thoughts no matter how much he tried. The only person he couldn't get because she belonged to another. But she doesn't need to know that. He'd noticed her before the incident. The thought sent an unexpected flutter through Sana's chest. "And you?" she asked, trying to steady her racing heart. "What does Sterling Cole do when he's not rescuing panicked women at charity auctions?" "Try to build things that matter," he said simply, but there was depth in those words. "Leave the world a little better than I found it." Then, more quietly, almost to himself, "Try to be worthy of the people who inspire me." Sana tilted her head, studying him. "The magazines paint you as ruthless." "They paint what sells copies," Sterling said with a slight smile. "They don't know me. They don't know that I—" He stopped himself, something flickering across his face. "That you what?" "That I believe some things are worth waiting for," he finished carefully. "Worth being patient for." There was something in the way he said it, in the way he was looking at her that made Sana's pulse quicken. But before she could analyze it, he spoke again. "Tell me about him, Antonio." The subject change was gentle but direct. Sana wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite Sterling's jacket that he'd draped over her shoulders without her noticing. "Ex-husband," she said simply. Divorced 11 months ago, but he doesn't accept it's over. Is he dangerous? Sterling asked, his voice taking on an edge that made her look up. His jaw was clenched, his eyes hard. He never hit me, Sana said carefully. But Antonio knows how to destroy someone without leaving marks. Psychological control, isolation, manipulation. He considered me his property. Her voice cracked slightly. Sometimes I think bruises would have been easier. At least people can see those. Sterling's hands tightened on the balcony railing, his knuckles going white. And the restraining order? She looked at him sharply. The way you reacted when you saw him. The way he approached despite your obvious distress. The mention of unfinished business. His voice was tight with controlled anger. I recognize the pattern. He quickly covered up. It expired 3 months ago, Sana admitted, fighting back tears. I hoped he'd moved on, but he's been everywhere I go. Nothing explicitly threatening, just persistent. Always there, always watching. Men like him don't respect boundaries, Sterling said quietly, and there was such conviction in his voice. Only consequences. He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. I won't let him hurt you again. I know I have no right to say that, no claim on you, but He stopped himself, jaw working. But what? Sana whispered. But seeing him treat you that way, knowing he made you feel unsafe. Sterling's voice was raw. It makes me want to... He took a breath, visibly controlling himself. It makes me want to ensure you never feel that way again. There was something in his intensity, in the fierce protectiveness radiating from him, that should have scared her after Antonio. Instead, it made her feel cherished. Thank you, she said softly, for playing along tonight, for making him back down. You didn't have to do that, and you do not have to be emotional about my plight too. It's over now. Yes, I did, Sterling said firmly, holding her gaze. Some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth protecting. The way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about tonight, like he meant something deeper, made her heart skip. They stood in comfortable silence, the city glittering below them like scattered stars. Sana found herself not wanting to leave this bubble they'd created, this moment where she felt safe and seen. I should go, she finally said reluctantly, before he decides to come back. Let me drive you home, Sterling offered immediately, already pulling out his phone. Please, you don't have to... I know, he said, meeting her eyes. I want to. You're still shaking. She was. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. Okay, she agreed softly. Thank you. A sleek black Mercedes appeared within minutes, but instead of a driver, Sterling opened the door himself. As they settled into the leather seats and he took the wheel, Sana noticed how his hands gripped the steering wheel, tightly controlled. Like he was holding himself back from something. Where to? He asked. She gave him her Brooklyn Heights address, and as they drove through Manhattan's glittering streets, Sterling asked about her work. Not in that perfunctory way people do at parties, but with genuine curiosity. Tell me about your projects, he said. What are you working on now? Sana found herself opening up, talking about her passion for sustainable architecture. Her current project, a low-income housing complex in Queens that integrated community spaces and green technology. Architecture isn't just about buildings, she said, her hands gesturing animatedly. It's about creating possibility, taking empty space and imagining what could be. It's hope made concrete, literally. When she glanced at Sterling, she found him watching her with such intensity that she faltered mid-sentence. What? She asked. Nothing, he said softly, a smile playing at his lips. Just, you light up when you talk about your work. It's beautiful. The compliment, said so sincerely, made warmth bloom in her chest. You really care about this project, Sterling observed. The housing complex in Queens. I do. It's not glamorous work. There's no prestige in public housing, but these are families who deserve beautiful spaces too. They deserve architecture that respects them, that gives them dignity. She looked out the window. I was so relieved and grateful to have someone donate anonymously, and we were able to add everything, Sana said as her face lit up. Community gardens on the rooftops, solar panels, a real playground, not just a patch of concrete. Common spaces where neighbors could build relationships. It was almost as if some rich person heard me pray about it and made a huge donation. Excitement was now written all over Sana's face. That's extraordinary, Sterling said quietly, trying not to show the satisfaction of his anonymous gift pleasing her very much. The car pulled up to her Brooklyn Heights brownstone, a converted walk-up with character and good bones. Sterling got out first, coming around to open her door with old-fashioned manners that made her stomach flutter. "Thank you," Sana said as they stood on the sidewalk, not quite ready to say goodbye. "For everything tonight. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." "You would have handled it," Sterling said firmly, stepping closer. "You're stronger than you realize, Santa Mitchell. You survived 3 years with a man like that and still came out with your spirit intact and your passion alive. That takes incredible strength." The way he said her name, like it meant something, like he'd said it before in his thoughts, made her pulse race. "Could I?" She started, then stopped. What was she doing? She'd just used this man as a shield against her ex-husband. She had no business asking for anything more. "Yes?" Sterling prompted gently, his gray eyes warm. "Could I buy you coffee sometime?" She rushed out. "To thank you properly. I promise not to grab your hand and claim you're my boyfriend without permission." Sterling's smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger, less guarded, devastatingly handsome. "I'd like that very much," he said. "But let me by. Boyfriends should know more than just coffee orders, after all." She laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. "You don't have to keep up the pretense." "Who says it's a pretense?" Sterling said, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He pulled out his phone. "Your number?" She gave it to him with trembling fingers, watching as he saved it with meticulous care. "I'll text you tomorrow," he promised, then added more softly, "And Sana, if Antonio bothers you again, day or night, you call me." "Promise me." "You barely know me," she whispered. Sterling's expression was intense, almost pained. "I know enough," he said, then so quietly she almost missed it. "More than you realize." Before she could ask what he meant, he stepped back. "Good night, Sana. Sleep well." She watched his Mercedes disappear into the night, then went inside, triple-checking her locks out of habit. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. "This is Sterling. Sweet dreams." Sana stared at the message, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. For the first time in months, maybe years, she thought she might actually sleep well. The next morning brought another text, and Sana's heart skipped when she saw Sterling's name on her screen. "Good morning. I hope you slept better than I did. Coffee this afternoon? There's a place in Tribeca that makes excellent oat milk lattes. I may have looked up the best ones in the city last night." The thought of him researching coffee shops made her smile helplessly. She should decline. She was too recently divorced, too broken, too much of a mess to inflict on someone like Sterling Cole. But her fingers typed yes before her brain could intervene. "PM, I would love to." "Perfect. I'll be the nervous billionaire trying not to stare too much." The self-deprecating humor surprised her, made him seem more human, more real. They met at a small cafe with exposed brick and the rich aroma of freshly roasted beans. Sterling was already there when she arrived, and she watched him for a moment before he noticed her. The way he straightened his already perfect tie, the way he ran a hand through his hair, the nervous energy that seemed so at odds with his usual unshakable composure. Then he saw her, and his entire face transformed. He stood as she approached, and Sana noticed how his eyes tracked over her. Not in that invasive way Antonio used to, but like he was memorizing every detail, like she was something precious. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely relieved. "You sound surprised." "A little," Sterling admitted, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat. "I thought you might reconsider in the light of day. Last night was intense." "It was," Sana agreed, settling in. "But you were incredible. Thank you again." "You don't need to keep thanking me," Sterling said softly. Then, with a slight smile, "Though I'm not complaining about the coffee date." "So," Sana said, wrapping her hands around her latte, "Sterling Cole, tell me something the Forbes articles don't cover. What do you want to know?" "Everything," she said, surprising herself. "Who you really are when you're not being the ruthless billionaire everyone expects." Sterling was quiet for a moment, studying his own coffee cup. When he looked up, there was vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm someone who believes in waiting for the right things," he said carefully. "Who thinks patience is undervalued in our instant gratification world? I'm someone who—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. "Who thinks some things, some people, are worth waiting a lifetime for?" The intensity in his voice made Sana's breath catch. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "It's true," Sterling said simply. "What about you? Tell me something beyond what I can read in architecture journals. You've read architecture journals about me? Sterling's expression turned sheepish. I may have done some research last night. Your housing project in Queens is brilliant, by the way. The integration of sustainable technology with community-focused design is exactly what urban development needs more of. You actually read my proposal? Sana felt warmth spread through her chest. Every word, Sterling confirmed. They talked for 3 hours, conversation flowing so naturally it felt like reconnecting with an old friend rather than meeting someone new. Sterling asked thoughtful questions about her work, her inspirations, her dreams. He listened, really listened, in a way Antonio never had. I should warn you, Sterling said as their fourth coffee arrived, his expression turning serious. I'm not good at casual. Meaning? I like you, Sana, he said, meeting her eyes directly. Very much. I'd like to see you again, to get to know you better, but I understand if you're not ready. Your divorce is recent, and you have every reason to be cautious after what you've been through. My past doesn't get to dictate my future, Sana said firmly, even as her heart raced. I spent 3 years letting Antonio control my choices, my friendships, my life. I won't let him control this too. That's incredibly brave, Sterling said softly. Or incredibly stupid, she countered. I barely know you. For all I know, you could be another Antonio in a better suit. You're right to be cautious, Sterling agreed. So ask me anything. Anything at all. I'll answer honestly. Sana studied him, this man who seemed too good to be true. Why were you alone at the auction? Someone like you should have women lined up. Sterling was quiet for a long moment, something painful flickering across his face. I don't date, he said finally. Haven't in years. I've been waiting. Waiting for what? For someone who made me want to take the risk again, he said carefully, his gray eyes intense. For someone worth disrupting my carefully controlled life for. For someone who made me believe in possibility again. The way he was looking at her, like she hung the moon, like he'd been searching for her his entire life, made Sana's pulse race. And have you found her? She whispered. Sterling's expression was raw, vulnerable, achingly honest. I'm having coffee with her right now. Over the next 3 months, they built something real. Sterling proved himself different from Antonio in every way that mattered. He never pushed, never demanded, never tried to control. He showed up with coffee when she worked late, always remembering her order, always including a note that made her smile. He celebrated her victories like they were his own, and listened to her frustrations with genuine empathy. He introduced her to his small circle of close friends, his CFO Patricia, his childhood friend Devin, his younger sister Riley, and welcomed her into his life with an openness that still amazed her. They accepted her immediately, and Sana noticed how they all seemed. Unsurprised by her presence, like they'd been expecting her. He's different with you, Riley confided one evening when Sterling stepped away to take a call. Lighter, like he's finally allowing himself to live again. Again? Sana asked. Riley looked like she'd said too much. Just, he's been alone a long time. By choice. It's good to see him happy. If you're enjoying this story, do well to hit the subscribe button to support our channel, and hit the notification bell for more heartwarming stories like this. One evening, about 2 months in, Sterling attempted to cook dinner for her, herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables that came out slightly overcooked, but made with such care that it was perfect anyway. They ate on his penthouse balcony, Manhattan glittering below them like scattered diamonds. This is a disaster, Sterling said, examining his charred salmon with mock dismay. It's wonderful, Sana countered, meaning it. The food didn't matter. It was the thought, the effort, the fact that this powerful man had spent his evening trying to create something special for her. You're very kind to my questionable cooking skills, Sterling said with a smile. Then, more seriously, Sana, can I tell you something? Of course. He set down his fork, turning to face her fully. The look in his eyes made her breath catch, vulnerable, intense, achingly honest. I know it's only been 2 months, he said. And I know you need time after everything you've been through, but I need you to know. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm in love with you. Maybe I couldn't let you go since the moment you grabbed my hand at that auction. Or maybe before... He stopped himself abruptly, something flickering across his face. Before? Sana prompted, her heart racing. Sterling seemed to wrestle with something internally. Before I really knew you, he amended. But now that I do, I'm certain. I love your passion, your integrity, The way you see beauty in broken things and possibility in empty spaces. I love how you make me laugh. How you challenge me to be better. How you make me want to build a life, not just a company. Tears pricked Sana's eyes. Sterling. You don't have to say it back, he said quickly. I just needed you to know where I stand. That I'm not going anywhere. That I'll wait as long as you need. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Sana whispered. Which terrifies me because the last time I fell in love, it nearly destroyed me. But you're nothing like Antonio. You make me feel safe and seen and cherished. You are cherished, Sterling said fiercely, standing and pulling her to her feet into his arms. You're extraordinary, and anyone who couldn't see that is a fool. She melted into his embrace, feeling his heart thunder against her chest. I love you, she said against his shoulder. I'm terrified, but I love you. Sterling pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. We'll figure it out together, he promised. I'll spend every day proving I'm worth your trust. That night was the first time she stayed. They slept together, Sterling treating her like she was infinitely precious. Lying in his arms, Sana felt something she hadn't in years, completely, utterly safe. Move in with me, Sterling said suddenly into the darkness. What? Move in with me, he repeated, his arms tightening around her. Or I'll move in with you, or we'll find somewhere new together. I don't care which. I just want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. His voice cracked slightly. I want a life with you, Sana. Sterling, we've only been together 4 months. I know, he said, and I know it's fast. But when you know, and I know, Sana. I've known for... Again, that abrupt stop. Sana pulled back to look at him in the dim light. You've known for what? Sterling's expression was raw, conflicted. I've known since I met you that you were special. That you were different from anyone I'd ever met. That if I was lucky enough to be with you, I'd never let you go. There was something he wasn't saying, something hovering beneath his words. But the sincerity in his eyes, the love radiating from him, made her push aside her questions. Okay, she whispered. Yes, let's do it. Sterling's expression transformed. Pure joy, pure relief. Yeah? Yeah. Let's build a life together. The move happened over 2 weeks. Sterling insisted on professional movers, wouldn't let her lift anything heavy. Her furniture blended beautifully with his modern pieces, her artistic eye softening his stark penthouse into something that felt like home. It looks alive now, Sterling said, watching her arrange plants and art. It was always beautiful, Sana corrected. Now it's ours. For 6 blissful months, they built their life together. Antonio had stayed away since the auction, and Sana dared to hope he'd finally moved on. Sterling continued to amaze her, his kindness, his patience, the way he supported her career without trying to take over. Sana was working late at her firm when an email appeared from an unknown sender. Subject line, you deserve to know the truth. Inside was a dossier, detailed, professional, devastating. Photos of Sterling at events over the past 3 years. Not random photos. Photos where Sana appeared in the background, often unaware of the camera. Sterling at her architecture firm's gallery opening 2 years ago, while she was still married. Sterling at the coffee shop across from her old apartment. Sterling at the community board meeting where she'd presented her housing project proposal. Her blood turned to ice as she scrolled through image after image. There were dozens of them spanning years. Sterling in the background of her life, always watching, always there. The email ended with, he's been obsessed with you for years. He knew you were married. He's been funding your housing project through a shell corporation. What kind of man does that? Call me. We need to talk. Antonio. Her hands shook as her phone rang. Against every instinct screaming at her not to, she answered. Did you get my email? Antonio's voice was smooth, falsely concerned. What do you want? I want you to understand what kind of man you're with. He's been watching you for years, Sana, and now he's using you. This is altered, is it? Look at the timestamps on those photos. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, all while you were married. Why would a billionaire like Sterling Cole repeatedly show up at random events in Brooklyn unless he was following you? Doubt crept into Sana's mind like poison. There could be explanations. And the funding for your housing project? That anonymous donor? Check the corporate filings. It's one of his shell companies. He's been manipulating your career, Sana, using you. Why are you doing this? Because I still care about you, Antonio said, and she could hear the lie in his voice. And because you deserve to know you're being played. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., That Tribeca cafe where you had your first date with him. Fitting, don't you think? I'm not. Come alone, or I'll expose this to the media and everyone would see the wealthiest billionaire stalking a married woman. You know this is enough to ruin him, don't you? I have information about what he's really after, and you're just a pawn in his game, Sana. He hung up. Sana sat frozen, staring at the photos, Sterling in the background of her life for years. How was that possible? How could she not have noticed? She pulled up the corporate filings for her housing project's anonymous donor, traced the money through layers of LLCs until she found it, a company registered to one of Sterling's subsidiaries. He'd been funding her work, without telling her. For how long? That night, she confronted him in their penthouse, her laptop open to the damning photos. How long have you known about me? She asked without preamble. Sterling froze, his face draining of color. Sana, how long, Sterling? He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were full of pain. 3 years. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. Her knees nearly buckled. You've been watching me, she said, her voice hollow. While I was married, while I was trapped with Antonio. You were there in the background doing nothing. It wasn't like that. Sterling stepped toward her, but she backed away. Then what was it like? Explain to me how this isn't predatory. Explain how you're different from Antonio. I never approached you, Sterling said desperately, and she could see real anguish in his eyes. I never interfered with your marriage. I saw you at an architecture lecture 3 years ago, and yes, I was captivated. But you wore a wedding ring, his voice cracked, so I kept my distance. By showing up everywhere I went? By admiring you from afar, Sterling said, his hands clenching at his sides like he was physically stopping himself from reaching for her. By hoping that if you were ever free, if our paths ever crossed properly, I might have a chance to know you. To be worthy of you. Worthy? Sana's laugh was bitter. You funded my housing project without telling me. You wanted to manipulate my career? No, Sterling's voice was fierce. I funded your project because your work is brilliant and deserved backing. Because watching those city council meetings where you fought for funding, seeing how they dismissed your vision, it destroyed me. You deserved better than that. He sighed rejectedly and continued. So I used a private foundation to avoid recognition or influencing you in any way. I just wanted to see your vision become reality. Sterling ran a hand through his hair, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. I should have told you. I know I should have, but I was terrified you'd react exactly like this. That you'd think I was no better than Antonio? Are you? Sana asked quietly, tears streaming down her face. Sterling looked like she'd struck him. I love you, he said hoarsely. I have loved you from afar for 3 years, respecting your marriage even though watching you with him, seeing how unhappy you were, it killed me every day. I love you now with everything I am, but if you think I'm anything like the man who abused you, then I've failed you utterly. I need some air, Sana said, grabbing her coat with shaking hands. I need to think. Where are you going? Antonio wants to meet today, at that cafe. He says he's working with people trying to destroy you, and will use this if I don't show up. Sterling's expression turned to stone. Don't go, it's a trap. Maybe it is, or maybe it's the only way I'll get the truth. She headed for the door. Don't follow me. I mean it, Sterling. She left him standing in their living room, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. At 1:45 p.m., she arrived at the Tribeca cafe. Antonio was already there, looking smug and polished. Sana, I'm glad you came. Let's skip the pleasantries, she said coldly. What do you really want? To show you the truth about your precious Sterling. Antonio slid a folder across the table. He's not who you think he is. She opened it. Inside were financial documents, emails, contracts. Sterling's been trying to acquire Meridian Corp for 2 years, Antonio explained. My current employer. I realized he had an obsession with you, and it presented an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To get close to him through you? Antonio smiled. Your housing project? He funded it, yes, but not out of charity. He needed access to city contracts you were involved with, approvals he couldn't get otherwise. You're lying. Am I? Why else would a billionaire care about low-income housing in Queens? He's been using you, Sana, using your work, your connections, your influence. And you're not using me right now? Sana's voice was icy. You're not trying to manipulate me into betraying Sterling? Antonio's mask slipped slightly. I'm trying to protect you. No. You're trying to destroy a man who has everything you don't. Success, respect, integrity. Sana stood up. I came here for answers, and I got them. Just not the ones you expected me to find. Sana, wait. Sterling might have admired me from a distance, but he never tried to control me. He never manipulated me, never isolated me, never made me doubt my own worth. He waited, respected my marriage, and when fate finally brought us together, he loved me honestly. You're making a mistake, Antonio said, his voice hardening. The only mistake I made was wasting 3 years married to you. She turned to leave. You walk out that door and you'll regret it, Antonio called after her. I have friends with very long reaches. Sterling Cole will be destroyed, and you'll be collateral damage. Sana stopped, pulled out her phone, and pressed stop on the recording app. And now I have evidence of you threatening both of us. Sterling's lawyers will find that interesting. Antonio's face contorted with rage. He grabbed her arm as she turned away. You bitch! Sana yanked free and headed for the exit. Antonio followed, his control completely gone now. You think you've won? He shouted as they reached the street. You think love conquers all? I'll destroy everything he's built and I'll make you watch. Leave me alone, Antonio. Sanaya backed away as he advanced. Before she realized what was happening, Antonio had grabbed her phone, smashing it against the ground. You're not recording anything, he yelled. At that moment, Sterling's Mercedes screeched to a halt at the curb. He couldn't stay away from her as she wanted, not anymore, so he followed her. He jumped out, his face a mask of fury. Get away from her, Sterling commanded, his voice deadly calm. The stalker shows up, Antonio sneered. How predictable. This is perfect, Antonio said, pulling out his own phone. Both of you here, let me call my associates at Meridian. They'll want to hear how Sterling Cole's been using his girlfriend for insider information. I have proof that's a lie, Sterling said. Every document, every contract, every decision I've made regarding Sana's projects has been legitimate and transparent. Your word against mine, Antonio said. And I have 3 years of documentation showing your obsession with a married woman. How will that look in the press? Like a man who fell in love and waited respectfully, Sana said quietly. Like a man with integrity. Antonio's laugh was bitter. You're both pathetic. We're done here, Sterling said, reaching for Sana's hand. Come on. But Antonio wasn't finished. You think you can just walk away after everything? After you ruined my marriage, my life? You ruined your own marriage, Sana said, turning back. With your control, your manipulation, your abuse. Sterling had nothing to do with that. He was there, Antonio shouted, circling, waiting. He wanted you. Yes, he did, Sana said calmly. But unlike you, he respected my choices. He never interfered, never contacted me, never did anything except hope. That's not stalking, Antonio. That's restraint. Something broke in Antonio's expression. You should have been mine, he said, his voice cracking. We could have had everything. We had nothing, Sana said softly, because you never loved me. You loved owning me. She turned to leave with Sterling, but Antonio lunged forward, grabbing her shoulder. Don't you walk away from me. The shove was instinctive, Antonio trying to spin her around. But Sana was already off balance from turning. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on the curb. Everything slowed down, Sterling's hand reaching for her, the edge of the stone planter rushing toward her. The crack as her head connected with concrete. Pain exploded through her skull, and then the world tilted sideways. Sana! Sterling's voice was anguished, distant. She was on the ground, warmth spreading beneath her head. Sterling was there immediately, his hands cradling her head, his face above her swimming in and out of focus. Stay with me, he commanded, his voice breaking. Sana, stay with me. He quickly pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Sterling. Her voice sounded strange, far away. I've got you, he said, his hands gentle on her head, trying to stop the bleeding. Help is coming, just hold on. Blood soaked through his shirt, his hands. She could see the terror in his eyes, the absolute devastation. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, I doubted. No, Sterling said fiercely. No, you had every right. I should have told you everything from the beginning. I should have been honest. You loved me, Sana said, her vision blurring. All this time. Yes, Sterling's voice cracked. From the moment I saw you, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I'm so sorry I let my fear of losing you keep me from being completely honest. She could hear sirens in the distance. Antonio was shouting something, but it sounded underwater. I love you, Sana said, tasting copper. I love you, Sterling. I believe you. The paramedics arrived, pulling Sterling away from her. He watched in horror how they are trying to stop the bleeding, his hands covered in her blood. "Sir, you can ride with us," the paramedic said. Sterling climbed in without hesitation, holding her hand as they worked on her. Behind them, police were restraining Antonio, his face pale with shock at what he'd done. In the ambulance, as Sana's consciousness flickered, she felt Sterling's hand holding hers. "Stay with me," he kept saying. "Please stay with me." She held onto his voice like an anchor, fighting the darkness that wanted to pull her under. The surgery took 4 hours. Sterling sat in the waiting room, still covered in Sana's blood, refusing to leave even to clean up. When the surgeon finally emerged, Sterling shot to his feet. The skull fracture was significant, but the surgery was successful, the doctor said. "Can I see her?" "She's in ICU, family only." "I'm her husband," Sterling said, the lie coming easily because it felt like truth. They let him in. Sana looked so small in the hospital bed, her beautiful face pale against the white sheets, her head wrapped in bandages. Machines beeped steadily around her. Sterling sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. "I'm here," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." For 2 days, he didn't leave her side. He talked to her constantly about their first meeting, their first coffee, their first kiss. About his 3 years of loving her from afar, the tortuous discipline of respecting her marriage while his heart broke every time he saw her. "I fell in love with you at that architecture lecture," he confessed, his voice raw. "You were presenting your thesis on sustainable urban housing, and you were so passionate, so brilliant. You had this light about you that made everyone in the room sit up and pay attention. I saw your wedding ring, and I knew I had no right. But I couldn't help myself from attending events I knew you'd be at. I never approached you, never interfered. I just wanted to be near you, even if you never knew I existed. When I saw you at that auction, trapped and terrified, it was like the universe was giving me a chance to finally do something useful. To protect you like I'd wanted to for 3 years. And then you grabbed my hand and it felt like fate. Like everything I'd waited for was finally beginning." He pressed her hand to his lips. "Please wake up. Please come back to me. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life being completely honest with you. No more secrets, no more omissions, just us, completely transparent." On the 3rd day, Sana's fingers twitched in his. "Sana?" Sterling leaned forward. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding his face. "Sterling," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm here," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm right here." "You're crying," she observed weakly. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, laughing through his tears. "Don't ever do that again." Antonio? Arrested, multiple charges including assault, harassment, and criminal threats. His associates at Meridian Corp are being investigated for corporate espionage and conspiracy. Your recording helped. "Good. 3 years," she said softly. "You loved me for 3 years and never said a word. Never interfered with my marriage, even though you must have known it was toxic." "I had no right." "You had every right to your feelings," Sana said, "but you chose to respect my choices." "That's not obsession, Sterling. That's integrity. You're not angry?" "I'm touched," she said, "and a little overwhelmed, but mostly I'm grateful." "Grateful? That someone saw me, really saw me, long before I saw myself. That someone thought I was worth waiting for." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I love you," Sterling said. "I'm so in love with you, it terrifies me." "I love you too," Sana whispered. "And I will always do." 6 months later, Sana stood in the community center built from her housing project, watching Sterling read to neighborhood children. Her hand rested on her growing belly, their daughter, who they'd decided to name Madison. Antonio had been sentenced to 5 years for assault and conspiracy charges. The investigation into Meridian Corp revealed years of corporate fraud, and Sterling's company had weathered the attempted takedown with his reputation intact. More importantly, they'd weathered it together. As they settled in for the evening, Sana reflected on their journey. It hadn't been the fairy tale she'd once dreamed of. It had been better. More complicated, but ultimately more beautiful because it was real. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.